Welcome to the Andy Petronic Podcast. Over decades of coaching, tinkering, and life adventuring, I've learned that finding our way to optimal health and well-being is a process. It's slow, and it's hardly linear. It takes courage, plus a willingness to fail forward while keeping a smile on your face and finding joy in the process. It also takes community. This podcast is the place I have conversations with health, fitness, and well-being movers and shakers. People who are experts, innovators, action takers, and who are advancing the modern day conversation. The purpose? To touch, move, and inspire. To keep us all moving forward on this lifelong journey together. Yo, 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 everyone. It's Andy, and I'm back. We took a week off last week. I took a week off last week because I was on vacation with my family. And, oh my gosh. We took literally every day possible from my son's school to leave both our city and our country. We spent 4 days in Deer Valley skiing. I skied for the first time on good skis in about 20 years. Real skiing. Last year I skied with my son, kind of teaching him how to ski. This year, I skied with a buddy of mine who is a black diamond skier, and so it was my first real opportunity to let loose and go, and it was phenomenal. The new skis, shorter skis that turn better. 20 years ago, I was skiing on like 205s. For you skiers out there, those are long skis and they're hard to turn. And now the skis are shorter and they turn better. And I had so much fun. The conditions weren't great because it had rained the day before we got there. But they were great actually on the groom slopes. So I was grateful to not have a snowboard and to be skiing because it is much better. Skiing on groomers is actually super fun on skis. Not so much fun for me, anyway, on a snowboard. And then we left the country. We took a 24-hour break. We flew back home and then hopped on another plane and headed to Belize, which was a trip that was planned way, way, way in advance. The ski trip was a late addition to our schedule. And man, oh man, country is amazing. It's an English-speaking country in Central America. It's the only English-speaking country in Central America. They operate on all our systems. So, they use pounds, they use miles. It's not metric system. It's not like the rest of Europe, which is interesting because it was originally a British colony, and which makes it really kind of fun to go to because you don't feel like you're in a foreign country, although you are. They have their own money, and but everybody speaks English, and they speak a version with a dialect that's kind of like they call it Creole, which is not like French Creole in New Orleans, which is more French, obviously French Creole. They speak an English Creole, which is more like Jamaican, like a Jamaican accent. And when they're really going whole hog with their accent, I don't understand a word they're saying. But everybody, it's an English speaking country. It's also really fascinating, the Mayan history in Belize. We went to a Mayan ruin site called Caracal that was spectacular. The idea that there were 200 million Mayans, I believe I got that number right. It's either 20 million or 200 million. I know that's a big difference. But still, the number is pretty staggering, who basically the civilization just disappeared. We saw tons of Mayan ruins. We went into a cave that was like a 5-hour underground, water-filled kind of canyoneering, up waterfalls and rock climbing, and it was pretty gnarly. But inside the cave were, ruins that were 1,500 years old, pots and full skeletons from sacrifices. just really, really fascinating place. And did some scuba diving, did some snorkeling. The whole family had a great time, super relaxed. So it's good to be back, kind of. Being back hit me in the face yesterday because we got back at like 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, and I had to get my son to school the next morning, and I was back at work. So it's been a little bit struggling. It's been a little bit challenging. But hey, that's life, and that's what you get when you when you fill every waking moment of the vacation being away from home. So let's get on with the podcast today. I've got really fascinating person for the podcast today. Her name's Diana Rodgers. This is podcast episode number 134 of the Andy Petronic podcast. Diana Rodgers is my guest. She's a real food nutritionist she's working on a documentary that I love the working title of. It's called Kale versus Cow. She's the host of the Sustainable Dish podcast. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a minute. But that's coming up. And I just sent out on April 1st my third, not draft, issue of my newsletter. And God, I'm getting great feedback from people on the newsletter. It's really interesting sending things out by email versus posting them in a blog. I feel like I'm directly communicating with people, which I am because I'm getting responses. I'm getting emails back. I'm getting to interact with my friends that I don't necessarily email back and forth with on a regular basis. I'm providing them hopefully with value. The idea of the newsletter is just short, pithy, actionable things that I'm either doing or learning or want to bring to, my friends and my whoever subscribes, my subscribers, attention. There are a couple of videos I linked to. There was a new email app. Well, it's new to me anyway, called Astro that I linked to. Anyway, if you're interested in getting the newsletter, you can subscribe at andypetronic.com. You can also see all the previous episodes of the podcast there. But check it out if you want to. If you're a Spotify person and you listen to things on Spotify, guess what? The podcast is available on Spotify. Yes. That makes me happy because I listen to Spotify all the time. And it makes it like a one-stop shop for music and the podcast. This podcast, I don't care about other podcasts. This podcast is on Spotify. It's called the Andy Petronic Podcast. So there you have it. There you have it. And a quick word from our sponsor, which is The Good Kitchen. They, it's amazing. I came back from vacation and guess what was waiting for me? Not waiting for me, but I got within 24 hours of being home was a box of meals that are going to sustain me for the next 2 weeks. You know how amazingly good that feels? My refrigerator was empty and, to have those meals. Now I get lunches and they're really not lunches. They're really any meal because they're designed to be heated up. I don't heat them up typically. I rip the cover off and I just chow it down because the food is delicious. It's Whole Life Challenge compliant. They have paleo options. They have keto options. They have vegetarian options. It's really good stuff. And it's less expensive than you think it might be. And to have that as a relief of there's no need to think about meals and where they're coming from when you have something like The Good Kitchen delivering meals to you. So check it out. To get 15% off your first order, use the link thegoodkitchen.com/WLC. Okay. Fan of the week. Fan of the week. Every week I read someone's review of the podcast because I need your reviews. So if you're listening to this and you get something out of the podcast, please head to iTunes and leave a review. The easiest way to do that is to use the bit.ly link I created, which is bit.ly bit.ly/Andy Petronic podcast. bit.ly/Andy Petronic podcast. It should open up iTunes for you, and go to the ratings and reviews and leave a rating, write a review. Anyway, if you do, I will read it. Well, I won't necessarily read all of them, but I've got a lot now, and would love more. So it just helps the podcast to become more well-known in the iTunes world, and that is the world of podcasts right now. So please do that. My fan of the week this week, his name's Daniel Boster. By the way, Daniel, if you hear your name read, your review read, and you shoot me an email, I will shoot you out a t-shirt. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to write this. This is a little bit longer, so let me get right to it. Daniel writes, inspiring, interesting, and real. I came to the podcast via the Whole Life Challenge and Andy Petronic's Living Room Workouts. I liked Andy from the workout videos, so I thought I'd check out the podcast. I'm incredibly happy I did. I listen to a lot of podcasts that focus on ideas, philosophy, and so on. Some are serious, some are more lighthearted. I especially love the Whole Life podcast because it involves conversations between interesting people who love what they do. Andy is gracious and sharp. He's always prepared for the interviews and asks exactly the questions I would if I got to talk to his guests. And he does have the most compelling people on his guests. What I like most is Andy's humanity. He shares his experiences, his stories, his struggles, with fitness, nutrition, and so on. One especially cool moment in an earlier episode was when he was recording an episode and a contractor interrupted the podcast. I thought to myself, Andy is a real person. An obvious thought, I know, but I think it's cool that someone with his discipline is also someone I can relate to. And he seems to get his guests really excited about their work and passions. This is a great and rare skill as an interviewer. I learn something and am inspired every time. You should check out this podcast. Daniel, thank you so much. Like I said, I'd love to send you a t-shirt. So shoot me an email. Let me know you heard it, and I'll get one sent out to you. Okay, so let's talk about this guest, got Diana Rodgers, and what's coming in the next hour and a half conversation. She is a real food nutritionist. She lives and works on an organic farm near Boston, Massachusetts, that runs a vegetable and meat CSA. She's the author of 2 best-selling cookbooks and runs a clinical nutrition practice. She writes and speaks about the intersection of optimal human nutrition, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and social justice. She's also the producer of the Sustainable Dish podcast, interviewing experts in the environmental and health movement. In her new film, Kale versus Cow, she will be examining the environmental, nutritional, and ethical case for better meat. We talk about a lot of stuff, and there's such great, rich material in here. She refers to documentaries and books and sources of inspiration for her from for her life. She's been she's lived the journey. What got her into the nutrition business was her journey struggling with food, struggling with the allergic reactions her body experienced. I'm trying to remember. I think she had celiac, but it was never diagnosed. So, we talk a lot about this in the podcast, but she goes through years of struggling with symptoms of celiac, not knowing that she had celiac. That's obviously something that many, 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 many more people know about today. So a lot of that has been, people struggling with that has been alleviated because people are testing for it. But she talks about her journey and how she found a remedy. She figured out how to eat so that she could sustain her health, and a lot of that has to do with a Paleolithic lifestyle, Paleolithic eating, ketogenic eating, eating fats, not running away from fats. So there's a lot of really, really good stuff in here. We also talk a lot about sustainable farming and how the elimination of cows is not the answer we're looking for. Any farm needs ruminants. They need them. Trust me. You just got to go in and listen to the conversation. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I want to get her going and get this podcast going. So here we go. Diana Rodgers, welcome to the Whole Life Podcast. Maybe I'll say that again as soon as she comes in. So let me actually welcome you guys to the conversation with Diana Rodgers. Enjoy. Diana Rodgers, welcome to the Whole Life Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You know, I learned of you and about your work and what you're up to in the world from Bobby. Bobby's last name is
Gill.
Bobby Gill. Yes, Bobby Gill. He was on a podcast about 8 weeks ago. I met him at Paleo FX about a year ago, and I met him because of my relationship with Robert Morton at Territory Foods, and so it's all a big domino. I'm wondering who's going to be next in that domino. Because it just continues. I mean, it's like the layers of the onion. They keep peeling back and they keep peeling back. And
yeah, those conferences are awesome because of all the friendships and connections I make. It's not even so much sitting in the lectures that's so beneficial or has been so great for me. I've been to every Paleo FX and almost every AHS since they started.
Wow.
I just missed AHS last year because I was doing the Icelandic Health Symposium, which was exactly the same time. But it's just the people that I've met and just that FaceTime and, having dinner with folks and getting to know them has really been amazing.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because I'm literally putting the finishing touches on my first newsletter that I've ever written. Uh-huh. And I was just describing how for the past 12 years, I've really done everything I can to stay behind the curtain. Not really done everything I can, but when I started CrossFit Los Angeles, I really didn't associate my name with it at first. At first I did, but then I changed it from Patronic Fitness to CrossFit LA. And then we started the Whole Life Challenge, and I'm really taking a back seat to, it's not Andy Patronic's Whole Life Challenge or, it's just the Whole Life Challenge.
I'm the same way. I don't love my name out front. Yeah.
But I'm actually taking a little risk to start. I'm starting a website that's just Andy Patronic, and I'm starting to actually put out some of my stuff because I feel like I'm at a point in my life where that actually serves the world in a greater way, and I'm kind of robbing the world, not in an egotistical sort of way, but just in a very real kind of way. Like I'm robbing the world of actually what's up with me and what they might be able to glean from things that I'm exposed to that they're not. So
yeah. Well, I'd probably
exciting.
do the same thing if people didn't keep forgetting the D in Rodgers. And, if I Googled Diana Rodgers, as my appearing in media, it's always with just the G.
Right.
So that's unfortunate.
That is, yeah. That's, yeah. That'd be like being named, John Doe. Like, oh God, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have that problem with my name. So
yeah.
Well, listen, you're not on the podcast to talk about names, although we can talk about names. I'm sure we can probably come up with great things. I invited you because of your work, because of the work you're doing in the world of nutrition, the work you're doing in the world of sustainable farming and quality of food. And I thought our conversation would be fascinating. So I'd love to, look, we've never actually met before this conversation. So I'd love to hear more straight from the horse's mouth, what it is you're up to and how you got started on this adventure. And
Yeah. Well, I actually used to be a competitive horseback rider way back. So
wow.
That we can start there.
Okay, cool.
So when I was a teenager, my summer job was working on organic farms, just helping to do the harvest, weeding, and selling things at the roadside stand. My boss quickly realized that I'm not a good person for harvesting melons because you have one person picking them off the vine and then you toss it to the person. I was supposed to be the catcher, and I am not. I am not that coordinated. So, every time I dropped a melon, that was $5 right there.
Right.
So anyway, I just love being outside. I love being covered in dirt. And I was an art major in college, actually. Studied some film and ended up with a minor in art history and ended up teaching photography for a while and then became a furniture maker. But then I needed to get a real job and actually pay the rent that I had to pay. And
just to stop you for 1 second, did your parents, how did your parents feel about all that? Like, were they supportive of your artistic ways? And did you, like, was that a challenge to continue to go down that road before you quote, got a job?
Well, my mom took me to every single art museum and signed me up for every art class. So that was amazing that she helped me out with that. When I got to college, my dad was paying for all three of us to go to school at the exact same time.
Wow.
And I was told that I could either, he called the director of my program actually and said, well, she needs something practical here. So what are the options? And it was at the time, so I'm dating myself here, computer aided design, right?
Right.
Which today would be called graphic design.
Right.
But there was no such thing back then. I was like, what is this, engineering? Like, I don't even know what that is, that means,
right.
Or art education. And so I ended up with a BFA in art education because I was able to take welding and sculpture and I was able to take a little bit of everything, and I love all forms of art. So it was fine. But then when I did my little stint in teaching, I realized how much I hated high school when I went there, and I just really didn't want to be in high school again. And it just I was repulsed by having to be back in an institution again. So I ended up getting a job at an advertising agency, and as like a paying the bills. And because I didn't know computer aided design, I ended up in the strategy department, and that was really fun for me. I started getting into marketing strategy, and then kind of went on from there and went into natural foods marketing. I worked a little bit for National Public Radio as well, doing some marketing for them, and then Whole Foods for many, many years. I was in marketing at Whole Foods Market.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it wasn't until
did you work in the corporate offices for Whole Foods, or did you?
I was in the Boston area, so
Okay.
The mothership in Austin. At the time, things are really changing at Whole Foods now, but at the time, every region, every store was its own company practically.
Oh wow!
So we had a lot of individual freedom, and not a lot of budget. So I had to get super creative, which was fun, actually.
Yeah.
And during all this, I found out that my lifelong issues with my digestion, I was very sick as a kid, underweight, low muscle tone. Didn't find out until my mid-20s that I had celiac disease.
Right.
So that was a huge shocker because, again, at the time, and I'm dating myself again, there was nothing. There was there was one brand of gluten-free bread out of Canada, and it was really bad.
Yeah.
And so actually one of my jobs at Whole Foods was approving gluten-free products. They'd give me the latest, potential gluten-free pancake mix to sell, and I'd bring it home and cook it and be like, yes, this is the best, brownie or pancake, whatever mix. Anyway, so I, after the birth of our daughter, it just didn't make a lot of sense for me to have two kids in daycare and, an off-farm job. And so, and I'm skipping my whole husband's transition into becoming an organic farmer during this process.
Wow. Well, that's kind of significant
so,
considering what you're up to today.
Yeah. So I can back up and give you his trajectory, because we met in college. So he was an English major.
Did your digestive issues continue to haunt you through college, through high school? I mean, up until your 20s?
Yeah. But I didn't, it was normal for me. So I didn't know, and my doctor, my pediatrician said it was a lactose intolerance. So I basically just ate Pop-Tarts and Cheerios with soy milk.
Oh God.
I had standard American diet plus soy.
Right.
Was my diet growing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I just didn't know any better.
And that was so normal. I mean, that was so, because I'm probably older than you. I mean, celiac. Nobody knew what celiac was. I mean, there was no conversation in the world at all about any of this stuff.
I know. And I was eating bread like 6 times a day. I mean,
Right.
I was eating so much wheat. And I actually, that week I was diagnosed, I was taking a class in vegetarian Chinese cooking at the Cambridge Center for Adult Ed, and had learned about seitan, and was like, oh my God, this is like food of the gods. This is the most delicious thing I've ever had. You know, I was like trying to be vegetarian and eat healthy. And I finally found this like delicious stuff. And then I got a call on Friday that like it came back positive, and the endoscopy, like the whole thing. And I was like, that's what humans eat. Like, how can I be allergic to what I always eat? This
Right.
is, what am I supposed to do here? And then the dietitian that I saw, you know, just basically gave me a bunch of coupons for some processed foods and sent me on my way. And so I basically just went from like kind of vegetarian, low fat, sort of whole grain diet to the gluten-free version of that. And so my guts did feel better significantly, but it wasn't until many years later that that I really fixed everything. So there's like so many different like branches, so it's a little convoluted for me to like explain my whole life story and how I'm living on a farm today, but I can back up and explain my husband. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So he grew up in a suburb of Boston. We met in college, and he had just gotten back from Knowles, National Outdoor Leadership School. And right when he got back, he changed his major from environmentalism to English, because he was like, I love the environment, but I have no idea how I would have a job, you know, in this. I don't know what I would do. And so he just kind of went with English because that was like a good, you know, basic major to, you know, I don't know, get a regular job. And so,
well, like it sets you up for if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be, even if you want to be not really if you want to be a doctor, but it sets you up for a lot of stuff.
Lots of, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we moved from college to Portland, Oregon, just to kind of, you know, check out a different part of the country. And this was during the .com boom. Mm-hmm. And so we immediately got very high paying jobs with like they were like, oh my God, you're from Massachusetts. You must be like, they just gave us like a lot of money right off the bat. It was so funny. And so I was in high tech marketing. He was in market research, and because he knew how to like Google stuff. Like Google had just come out.
He knew how to work Google. He could go.
Yeah, exactly. So he was like this like high paid market research guy.
It's like the easiest form of the Dewey Decimal Library System, you know, that exists. Like, just Google it. I mean,
I know. But
back then, nobody knew.
You know, like
right.
when this was all just coming out.
Yeah.
It was like this mysterious.
Totally.
Like, oh my God, you know how to use the internet?
Right. Right.
So I don't think many of your listeners will even understand that. But,
no, because we have a lot of our age listeners. So
okay.
I think anyway. I mean, it's hard to know in a podcast.
You have a good elderly population there.
Your demographics in a podcast are very, very, very. Actually, most data in a podcast is very hard to see. So I don't really know, but I would imagine that we have quite a range of listeners.
Yeah. And so anyway, so we were living in Portland, and he was working for the Mayan, and he was miserable, like absolutely hated being inside. He's very athletic and, you know, has strong environmental and other, he almost, you know, became an environmental terrorist actually a little bit before I met him. And so to be a market researcher in a corporate, you know, cubicle, he was just like not happy at all.
Yeah. Was he going to go to work for Greenpeace, or what was his, did he have a...
He tried, we both tried within our, like I tried in art education to get a job, and the pay was just so bad. I would have had to like, the job that I was offered, I would have had to teach art in like 20 different schools and like cart around my art supplies with me in my car and like drive all over the state. And I think the pay was like $5,000. It was something just so outrageous. Yep. And same for him. He did work for an environmental nonprofit for a couple of weeks, and like it was just it was crazy. It didn't pay, and it was like not organized and whatever. And Anyway, so he read a book by Wendell Berry called The Unsettling of America, which is such a pinnacle book. And
The Unsettling of America. What was his back? What was
Wendell Berry?
Wendell Berry's background.
He is an agrarian and an essayist. There's an awesome documentary on him called Look and See.
Oh, cool.
Highly recommend it. And so he just sort of talks about where agriculture has gone, where American culture has gone. He's really into things like don't leave your hometown, come back with your skills and, contribute to where you came from kind of thing. And lots of great stuff, very similar to Joel Salatin in his agricultural ideas. So Andrew read that book, and we also at the time visited a few CSAs, which were also like this weird new form of agriculture that, it's everything sort of came together. He was like, look, we don't have to like live in Kansas if we want to be farmers. We can actually find smaller plots of land, in suburban settings and save it from being developed and provide people with great food. And I'm going to be a farmer. And so those were uncomfortable conversations to have, as my potential husband, right?
Jesus.
With my dad, who's an entrepreneur, business guy, very conservative.
Yep.
And his parents too, very, very conservative at the time. They love it now. I mean, everyone loves it.
Yeah, of course.
We've really built a great life around it. But at the time, it was radical.
Were you going to have to move? Were you going to have to buy land? Like, how do you even get started?
We moved back to Massachusetts, and he went back to UMass, which is where we met. And this time for a master's degree in soil science to kind of get more of that. And then also he got a job for $7 an hour working on a farm, like how to drive a tractor, all that practical stuff that you don't really learn in an academic setting. And then he was offered a job that included housing. We were actually working for the family of General George Patton, like World War II. Wow. Yeah. And so it was this big 230-acre farm. Housing was included, and he was the farm manager, and I actually ended up joining him after my time at Whole Foods, after I had our second kid, and I ran all the front of the house, like the CSA. We had a farm stand, a kitchen, weddings, education groups, all kinds of stuff. So I did all that stuff, and then he did the growing. And it was great. We were there for a long time, and then sort of the writing was on the wall that the farm was going to not be a farm forever. And so we found our current place, which we've been at for 6 years. We were at the other farm for 10. And it's not that far away. And so we're right outside of Boston. We're near Concord, Massachusetts, which is a really lovely suburb of Boston, highly educated, very interested local folks who are so appreciative of small scale farms.
Did you find it and buy it, or did you find it and just become how did you make that transition from one farm to the next?
So there was an organization called Land for Good that sort of brokered the deal. And so what happened was a couple bought this property because it was on the market, like it was going to, probably turn into Clark Farms Estates or something like that. And the town was really upset because the family that was farming here before, like she was the Sunday school teacher and the funeral director and hugely involved in the town. And then he was like not only the farmer, but the mayor. And this was a real hub of this town, which is, we only have one store. So there's not much going on in this town.
Is there a stoplight?
We don't have a stoplight.
No stoplight. Wow. Mm-mm. Okay. I got it.
No.
It's smaller than Mayberry.
It's small.
Cool.
It's small.
Cool.
And so anyway, so they basically, this couple bought the land to try to save it. They spent a little time trying to figure out what they were going to do with it. And then they finally connected with Land for Good. They put out like an RFP for farmers. And there were about 40 farmers that applied. And then, they asked us, like, what would you do? If this was your farm, how would you run it? And we got the job, basically, or my husband got the job. I don't do a ton on the farm at this farm just because my nutrition practice has really taken off. And I ended up going back to school for nutrition and everything.
I'm just curious, when he submitted the proposal, was his vision for a sustainable, like a Joel Salatin style environment at the farm, and had it already been that, or was that something new?
No, it had this farm. So the house I'm sitting in here is from 1740, and this has been a farm. Like, they used to bring the produce into Boston, and they would have to all ride back together because there'd be bandits jumping out of the woods, trying to get their money on the way.
Right.
You weren't sure if you were coming back, kind of thing.
Wow.
Super cool. And so, anyway, so it was a dairy farm for the last 100 years. And so there's a big silo. It's a very classic New England. In fact, there's those quizzes on Facebook, how blah, blah, blah are you or whatever. I saw one that was how New England are you? And it was a photograph of our farm.
Oh, really?
Someone had just taken, yeah.
Wow.
And so they wanted it to be some kind of community asset and in a farm, but they didn't really have much, beyond that. And my husband he's like the Pied Piper of our town. He has a string of kids following him around all the time. And, he's much more than just a farmer. He's always, coaching our kids' teams. And
does he put does he put the kids to work on the farm?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So
I used to love that. So I grew up in rural Maryland, and we used to go. We were never in. My parents were both professional musicians, but we used to go to my friends that lived on farms, and we would. It was more play than anything else. I would never really call it work, but we'd play with the hay bales, and we'd do a little bit of work. We were probably more annoying to the dad than we were anything else. But it was so much fun. God, it was fun.
Yeah. So after school, we are the hangout. So the kids can walk from school right to our farm. And we've got this, my son has built a man cave in the barn with a ping pong table that he wiggled up the stairs with his buddies. So he's 14 and he's our best tractor driver. He's legit. And things come innately to him because he grew up on the farm. He'll know when something's ready to get harvested or whatever, or he'll see he'll be that's not good soil, and then we have a 12-year-old daughter as well.
Cool.
And there's a bunch of kids harvesting here. We do an intern program with international students that are learning sustainable ag. We have an apprentice program. We do a lot of work actually with Harvard and MIT because they're just up the street. So they come out a lot. And there's an engineering lab at MIT that does all these weird experiments on low tech solutions for farmers in third world countries. And so they're always coming out here with these weird bicycles that can maybe cultivate at the same time, or, cool stuff like that.
Do you ever offer, I know some farms do this, but do you guys ever offer some sort of a camp environment where kids can come out and spend a week on the farm? And is that something that you guys have?
Well, we don't really have housing for campers.
Right.
At our other farm, we did a lot of, little kids, feed the chickens and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Come out and work the farm. We're that kind of experience. We're older kids, high school kids or something.
There's a farm on Martha's Vineyard that they've got a board out. This is genius, and I really want them to do that here. But there's a board with all the chores that need to be done and a dollar figure of how much you pay to do that chore.
Cool.
Feed the chickens $10 or whatever. So we haven't gone that far yet, but
feed the chickens $10. I would do that, unless it's 1,000 chickens. Then I'm then that's not so good. We took care of chickens for about 3 months on a friend's farm, and it was, they had about 60 or 70 chickens, and it's definitely work. It's not. Yeah.
But this is how much people would pay to do that.
What do you mean?
families are looking for family activities to do, and so they go to this farm and they pay $10 to feed the chickens.
What?
Yeah, no.
I have it completely backwards. I'm thinking of like I could earn $10 for. I would have to pay $10 to feed the chicken. Yeah. Oh my goodness! All right, well that's certainly interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so we do lots of fun stuff. We have big pig roasts and
cool.
stuff. We run a vegetable CSA, so we're primarily an organic vegetable farm, actually.
Okay.
And we grow every kind of vegetable that grows in New England. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty small CSA, about 200 members, which is relatively small. We partner with some fishermen. We do a fish share. People can add that on. We have a mushroom share people can add on. We have our egg share, and then we do pasture-raised meats as well. So we have pigs in the woods. We have sheep and goats that are pasture-raised. We rotate them on the farm, and then we do chickens for eggs as well.
Cool.
So it's a pretty fun place.
Yeah, absolutely. God, it sounds like paradise for a kid. I'm picturing. I'm like, I want to come and move in with you guys. Like, it sounds just like so much. I mean, I know it's a lot of. Look, I have so much respect for farmers because I know the rigors of that life and the lack of real time off ever is. I don't know. I think it'd be a whole different experience. But the idea of going and visiting and, doing the fun stuff for, 3 or 4 days would be amazing.
Yeah, no, it's really fun. And so when we do a communal lunch every day, and I work from home a few days a week. And so we just rotate who cooks and all eat together. So that's fun. And I get to hang out with lots of young people that are, very optimistic about the future and want to go into farming and stuff. So it's fun for me to hang out with them too.
Right.
Yeah. So, and so basically I did a ton at that other farm, but then I kept getting so many questions, like in our little store, why are you selling coconut oil? That's saturated fat, and saturated fat's bad for you. Mm-hmm. And I also had inherited a raw milk co-op. And so I was sort of running that, and I was like, what are these people here getting this raw milk and they're eating butter? So I'm backing up a little bit, my pre-nutrition education days. Mm-hmm. And so I just started learning a little bit more, right? And I went to a Weston A. Price conference, mm-hmm. and I had to hear eat butter about 20 times before I would eat butter because I was so scared.
Yep.
So then I wanted to learn more. I attended Nutritional Therapy Association, which is very centered on Weston A. Price, and it's sort of a holistic nutrition certification. And that was mostly just for me to try to figure out why my blood sugar was such a wreck and why I needed to snack every 15 minutes and, had a bag full of gluten-free granola bars with me all the time.
How did you know your blood sugar was a wreck? Did you just feel it or did you actually test it?
I felt it. I went to the doctor so many times, demanding that I had diabetes and why did I feel so horrible all the time? I could feel it. I could feel the roller coaster. I was very sensitive to it.
Right.
And I knew something was wrong, but I was doing everything that they told me to do.
Supposedly right? I mean, right.
Yeah. And I mean, I would get tunnel vision and practically pass out if I had to miss a meal. Oh my God, it was bad. And so I did this Nutritional Therapy Association, and then this book had just come out, and we were supposed to write book reports and follow a diet protocol in a book. Right. So we were to read a diet book and then follow the protocol and report back on our experience. Mm-hmm. And so the book I chose was The Paleo Solution.
Cool.
And I was already kind of sold on the Weston A. Price stuff. So I did kind of a higher.
Had you read Nourishing Traditions? Was that one? Yeah,
I had read that. Yeah. And so I was doing all the grain stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of guidance, in my opinion, on how much grains to eat. Mm-hmm. And so I was still just doing tons and tons of grains, basically gluten-free. But I was I had my soaked oatmeal every morning, with the butter in it, but it was still it wasn't working for me.
Yep.
And anyhow, so Rob's original prescription in that book is kind of on the lower fat end. And I had all this Weston A. Price, fat is good in me, and I knew it made me feel better. So I I kind of just upped the fat, and then I don't really love sweet potatoes, so I kind of just went low carb. So it was like an unexpected keto experiment, basically, is what I did, and it totally rocked me. Like I went from like black and white to color. I couldn't believe the difference for my body, and I was never overweight, but I was definitely in metabolic syndrome, like 100%.
Right.
And so just about 3 weeks.
Will you explain what that is, just so anybody listening, metabolic syndrome?
I mean, it's basically pre-diabetes.
Right.
And so I just was allergic to carbs, basically intolerant to carbs. And I wasn't having a very good time regulating my blood sugar. And, I think everyone inherently has different, genetics and life experiences that can predispose them to being, I had celiac, cesarean birth, no breastfeeding, soy formula until I was like in my 20s. Like I had a whole perfect storm of experiences that ended up, I was so hungry as a kid. I was eating all the time because everything just went straight through me. So I think my pancreas was like shot.
Well, and your gut. I mean, think about your gut and all the microvilli down in the large intestine and small intestine. I mean, like, there's nothing there. You're not absorbing anything, right? You're just going right through you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that totally, worked, and I couldn't believe it. I could go from breakfast to lunch without a snack. And
how did you happen to pick Rob's book? Was it just the bestseller of the month?
A friend of mine from high school recommended it.
Ah, okay.
So I was telling him about the nutrition program that I was in, and he was like, I really think, you and he said, have you heard of Rob Wolf? And I said, no. And he's like, oh my God, you haven't, he was like,
Rob Wolf fans tend to be zealot Rob Wolf fans.
Yeah.
What? You haven't heard of Rob Wolf? Come on.
Yeah. And so this guy's a trainer down in my hometown. So shout out to Jimmy McGuinney, who
is that his real name? What a great name.
Jimmy McGuinney.
I love that name.
He probably goes by Jim, but I remember him as, So anyway, so I started this little nutritional therapy practice kind of part-time out of a chiropractor's office. And, I knew that had worked for me, but I wasn't certain that it would work for, all the people that were coming to me.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, everyone who came to me, people with, messed up guts, people who needed to lose weight, people with blood sugar regulation, this kind of, lower carb diet, with no processed foods, like it was the ticket. It was a ticket for everybody.
Right.
And so, and then what happened was I noticed I had more and more people coming to me that were sick, right? That had Hashimoto's, because when you're you can go to any dietitian, but if you're Googling alternative nutrition, it's probably because you've got an issue, a major, issue going on.
Right.
And so I was just feeling a little bit out of scope with this holistic certification, because legally you're really only supposed, with those kinds of certification, at least in Massachusetts, you're supposed to counsel people on healthy eating or weight loss, but not, you can't do medical nutrition therapy.
I think that's really kind of funny. I mean, medical nutrition therapy, is that a doctor? Because most doctors don't, people go to the doctor kind of like you did when you were a kid. You went to the doctor and the doctor said, don't know what's wrong with you, but, gave you a little basic medical advice. Oh, you must be lactose intolerant. And from what I understand, I know about the medical industry, that's really kind of the prevalent, doctors don't get trained in nutrition. They don't get trained in this stuff. So it's still going on today. That's still, and that's kind of a funny thing that's legally the system. You have to go to a medical doctor for your nutrition needs, and you probably make a bigger difference than they can.
As it stands right now, if someone came to me with celiac disease, I couldn't tell them to go on a gluten-free diet. That's medical nutrition therapy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the other thing too is it's hard if you can't take insurance when. Yep. It's hard to make a real living that way. It's hard to get respect from other doctors and medical professionals. And, with all the writing I do and everything, I just decided I'm just going to, well, actually, I talked it over with a few people, and Matt Lalonde is a good friend of mine. He's over at Harvard and gave me a ton of advice, like in the earlier days, and was like, just make this your hobby. Just don't think about it. Just your hobby for the next several years is getting your RD. And it's just a side thing. So that was really good.
Well, once you're an RD, are you able to then recommend diets for celiac and whatnot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So it took me about 6 years to do the classes because I did them like 2 at a time. And remember, I was an art major undergrad. So biochem was, I never had to study in my life before.
Right.
And I had to get A's because these internships are really competitive. There's only a 50% match rate. So there's just not enough internships for the RD candidates coming out.
Right.
And I'm limited. I couldn't just go to some random, hospital somewhere to do my internship. I had to be in the Boston area, which is highly competitive.
Right.
So, I'm very proud to say I had a straight A average in every class, bit my tongue as much as I could, did the 1,200-hour unpaid internship that I actually had to pay to do, working in hospitals with, Boost and, crazy, low carb diets at the hospital are 250 grams a day of carbs. That's the diabetic standard.
Oh my God.
And so I got through all that, and now I'm on the other side, and the sun is shining. So that's great. So now I have a private practice, and I can, as long as I can show evidence, I can give the nutrition advice that I feel is appropriate, for the person I see.
Is that still the system today for becoming an RD? Like you have to go through that sort of, I would say torturous when it's.
It was torturous.
Yeah. Is that still, in place today?
So expensive.
Right.
And so much time
right.
Of my life in those classes. And in fact, they're even pretty soon, I think it's 2025 or 2020, they're going to make it so you have to have the master's degree as well to be an RD.
Wow.
Which most programs you do. I found one of the few programs that you didn't. I did not want to spend another $40,000 and another 2 years of my life getting a master's in this stuff.
Right.
If I was going to get a master's, there's so many more useful master's degrees I could get than standard nutrition,
Yeah. Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So I have a practice now. I have an office in Concord, Mass. I take insurance. Most people who come to me know a little bit about me, but some people don't. They just come like totally clueless and they don't know what they're in for. And as long as they do what I say, I can fix them, which is awesome. I have a GI doctor that sends me all these weird IBS cases that she can't diagnose. And I've had tons of success with her. So she just continues to send me referrals, which is great.
What kind of things do you do in your practice that are unique to you? Like, are you doing blood testing? Are you doing more emotional work? Are you just taking people and putting them on a paleo-ish diet? I know you do more than that. I'm just making questions up.
No, honestly, the last choice is pretty much what I do. I'm not awesome at holding people's hands and like walking them through the stages of change.
Okay.
Like, that's not what I'm great at. I definitely, if I get anyone with even a hint of an eating disorder, I send them to somebody else.
Okay. It's not nutritional therapy.
Yeah, no.
Right.
That's not.
Right.
That's a whole nother set of skills that I don't possess, basically. Because I just don't. I'm just kind of like, put on your big girl panties here and let's fix your diet. Like I don't have time to for people that aren't ready or like on the verge. I have another RD that's much nicer than me. And she is the one that takes those people. So I kind of feel someone out on email or phone before I decide who they're going to see, whether it's me or Joanna. But yeah, Joanna's much more tolerant and patient of the ones who need a little more hand holding. But what I do that's different, other than just I have a completely different diet philosophy, I like big change right away. And so it doesn't have to be like a Whole30 or paleo from day 2, but it needs to be at least gluten-free, sugar-free from day 2.
When you
right?
say
Like,
when you say sugar-free, how specific are you? Are you having people check labels in spaghetti sauce? Like what's the...
No, I do just like get rid of the gummy bears.
So the big stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I tend not to stress too much about like a little bit of ketchup on something.
Yeah. Right.
So I'll at least, and then, then we'll work on dairy and alcohol, but I see them every 2 weeks. So where a typical person might see a dietitian once every couple of months, I am on them and constantly talking to them. I have this awesome portal where they can take pictures of their meals and I see everything they're eating. They don't have to count calories because people don't know like what a cup of rice is. Like MyFitnessPal doesn't do many people, especially if you're cooking real food and you're eating a beef stew and you have to enter all that stuff in. So I feel like I can, if I can just look at what people are eating, I can have a pretty good sense of.
Do you find that it matters more the quantities that they're eating or the quality of the foods that they're choosing?
I focus only on food quality in the beginning.
Okay.
Because once we get that out, and I also, I tell them to eat like pretty boring meals because I'm a huge believer in, these hyper palatable, like you can even make Paleo and Whole30 hyper palatable.
Yeah.
I mean,
of course, yeah.
So I'm like roast a chicken, bake a potato, and have some broccoli with butter on it.
Right.
Like it's really hard to overeat that.
Right.
So, and I try to get people eating more meat, especially red meat. And, so whether they're ready to jump all the way in or they're not quite ready, but I pull out, because if you're just pulling gluten out, even if they don't have a gluten intolerance, that eliminates almost all processed foods right there.
Right.
And
how are people that don't know already what they're in for when they, knowing your experience and your background and what you do, how open are they of like, this is almost like, what's the word I'm thinking of? I can't think of the word. Well, kind of like you said, it took you 20 times of reading it's okay to eat butter, to try butter. How open are they to trying these new things that they've always heard for the past 50 years that they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah. Well, I try to let them know that, for example, if someone's overweight and they're coming to me, I first try to let them know that I'm not like the diet police, that I'm on their side, that it's not their fault. That they're overweight, that it's these hyperpalatable processed foods. And if you're not overweight in America, you're kind of not doing American right, Yeah,
it's true.
That it's really hard to navigate and there's really conflicting information out there and most of it's wrong. Everything in moderation is one of the worst things you can tell people when they're faced with Pringles, right?
Right.
And so, I'll get people like breaking down, because they've gone to a lot of other dietitians before. Maybe they've been on Weight Watchers ever since they were a kid, trying to do that everything in moderation. And, when you just focus on food quality and they're satiated from enough protein, because that's the other thing is 100 grams of protein minimum, like for weight loss, for anyone walking in the door pretty much. They're just naturally going to feel fuller. And we can just start working from there. So they'll see results right away and they'll feel more satiated. They'll feel more calm. And so I just kind of let them, I try to get them to trust me and that we're in it together and then I can totally help them and that they're not going to be hungry. Because that's a big fear too, is that they're going to feel hungry. And they're not.
Well, you're not really restricting the quantities of food they eat at first.
Right.
So, like, how would they be hungry? They can eat as much as they want. Just this is the only thing you can eat.
Yeah, exactly. But, usually with 100 grams of protein, that's all we need to shoot for and focus on in the beginning. And
then people don't overeat protein or fat, and they just don't. We're wired. I mean, like Rob Wolf says, we're wired to eat carbs and processed foods and so.
Right. And then I do give them a little guidance, like, if you're going to have a potato or sweet potato, you might want to consider having that with your dinner and keeping breakfast and lunch lower carb, just because they can wrap their heads around scrambled eggs for breakfast, a salad for lunch, and then like a 1950s style dinner for dinner,
Yep.
So I'm not saying that that's the solution for everybody, but that's just a good starting point, right? And that automatically kind of limits their carb intake without them thinking that I'm limiting their carb intake.
Right. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So, all right, I want to talk about the vegetarian plant-based versus what you're doing and what you're up to in your movie, because it's a pretty hot topic. It continues to be, because it's been a hot topic since I can remember. I mean, I've been in the fitness and nutrition business for 20 years now. And it was always there's always this thing between the two, and it's still there. And doesn't seem to be getting,
it's getting worse.
It's getting worse. Yeah. It's more polarized, and it's getting worse.
As is our country. Right?
Well, yeah, you could say that, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
I just think there's just not a lot of tolerance for context and nuance anymore.
Right.
Like black and white, that's all I can handle.
You're either this or you're that, and you're labeled that, this or that, and yes, right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So tell me about this. Your movie that you're funding now is called Kale versus Cow.
That's a working title.
Okay.
We may adjust it, but at the moment, that's what it's called. So in addition to having this nutrition practice, I've been running a podcast for a while, interviewing people in the health world, but also in the sustainable ag world, and kind of everywhere in between that. And I had started writing a book called Kale versus Cow, looking at the nutrition, environmental, and ethical basically case for more red meat, more better meat, more grass-fed meat in our diets, and why we need to stop vilifying cattle, and why, if you're considering least harm, wanting to cause least harm in your diet, which is certainly a noble thing, perhaps large ruminants may actually be the solution and not a plant-based diet, right? And so about halfway through writing this book, What the Health came out this summer, and everyone was all riled up and everything. And I mean, I get emails and calls all the time from young people saying, they're showing Cowspiracy at my high school. Do you have any talking points? And I'm like, I can't just send you talking points. Like, let me come. I'll come, and I'll just come to your school and try to defend the film for you, because we need to have a balanced conversation here. And that movie is just pure propaganda that they're showing in biology class at my kid's high school as if it's truth, which is super disturbing to me. And so What the Health came out, and now everyone's going vegan for health reasons. And I'm like, this is just ridiculous. And it's one thing, there's the true believers, which are probably most of your listeners and definitely my fans, who, will read science and be swayed by facts. But most people are swayed by an emotional, like people make their mind up based on emotion. And I think that film is a really awesome opportunity to sway someone emotionally.
Yes.
And so, what better way to show people why something like biodiversity is important than through film, and not just me writing it out in a book, So basically through storytelling. And so the film that we're looking to make is not going to be like investigative journalism with lots of, experts popping their heads in. It's going to be storytelling and really trying to sway people from their gut, basically. And so we have three main sections that we're going to be working on. One is the nutrition section, and we'll be diving in with Nina Teicholz, mostly, but we have other experts too that we're going to be pulling in, just about, how did we get to this point where we're so afraid of meat, and why is that? Why are we so afraid of saturated fat and cholesterol? And, what's the background there. We've got a doctor that we're really excited to feature. We're just trying to get some clearance from the marketing department where she works to make sure that it's okay that we film there. But it's an amazing story if it all comes together. I hope it will. She's doing amazing work. And then can you let on what's so amazing about it? Like can you tell anything about it? She's flipping the food pyramid on its head and doing studies and fixing people's lives with basically a keto type diet. Okay. Like Dr. Jason, I don't know. Do you know Dr. Jason Fung? I do. He was just on the podcast. And I mean, that's what basically his story is like. Mm-hmm. What are these strange inconsistencies with results and what doctors are prescribing around the world? Why isn't anybody noticing? Why isn't anybody doing anything or prescribing anything differently? And right. I love his work. And so this person is about to publish a pretty incredible piece of work, and I want to get it. I want to get the whole thing on film. Right. Cool. And I don't want anyone to scoop it, so I'm not going to tell you who it is. Yeah. No problem. Yes, there's not many. Right. But anyway, for the environmental piece, we're going to be really looking at farmers who are doing regenerative farming, regenerative ranching with their cattle. Can you just speak into it really quickly? Because there are people out there that might not have any idea what you're talking about. What is regenerative farming? Yeah, so the idea is that it's actually improving the land. So that's something that plant-based agriculture absolutely can't do, because when you plant something in the ground, like a carrot, and you harvest that carrot, the carrot is made up of the nutrients from that soil. And so when you're pulling it out, you're like making a withdrawal from the soil bank, and you need to replace that nutrition basically back into the soil. And so plant-based agriculture is inherently extracting nutrients and not putting it back, unless you can either, use some compost, but that's, not using any animal inputs at all is I haven't really seen it done. I know there are some people that are using algae instead of animal products, but I question the sustainability of that as well. And so really the best way to put nutrients back into the soil is using animal products, because we're just running out of we can't continue to do chemical ag anymore. The earth doesn't have unlimited resources. We can't continue to be using fossil fuel. How do they do it in Asia, in Japan and China, who've been eating rice for centuries? Like, how do they re-inject their land with nutrients so that they can keep harvesting? So any healthy ecosystem, any sustainable farm has plants and animals in the system, right? So, for example, on our farm, we're grazing the animals. Like right now, it's wintertime, and we've got cover crops on the fields. So we've got where we used to have a bed of zucchini, for example. We then plant some rye and some vetch, which are putting nutrients back into the soil. But then in addition to that, we're allowing the sheep and goats to graze it. So they're getting the green part nutrition, like the stuff that's above the soil, plus they're adding manure, which is inoculating the soil with bacteria and other nutrients it needs in order to be really, really healthy. Right. And in addition to that, we have a gigantic compost pile that we, are using animal waste, which is not waste, it's fertilizer. Right. And different, wood chips and things like that. And so we spread that on the fields as well. So you need all of those things in order for a really healthy, organic farm. And so you can go to the store and you can buy organic, fertilizer, but it's blood and bones. I mean, that's what it is. And poop, basically. And so that's, any healthy ecosystem in nature is plants and animals, not just monocrop soy. Right. And what I think a lot of people are missing is that, in order to create a large field of corn or soy, something had to be annihilated for that field to be there in the first place. So whether it was cutting down a forest or wiping out a large meadow that maybe was the home to thousands of species of birds and critters, those things aren't there anymore.
Right.
It's just soy. And then when we go through with chemical ag, we're sterilizing the soil.
Right.
And so that's the big issue with GMOs. It's not GMOs necessarily being the altered plant, although there's question with certain GMOs with that as well. But it's the fact that it's resistant to things like Roundup, so that they can spray 10 times more Roundup.
Right.
And destroy the soil. It washes into our waterways, all that destruction. So that can't continue at all. Right. So when I talk about regenerative ag, I'm talking about agriculture that is actually improving soil health. And one of the best ways to do that is with animal inputs. And so what we can do with cattle is graze them on pasture land. And there's a difference when we're looking at agricultural land. There's arable land, which is croppable, like soy and corn. And then there's pasture, which is you can't grow soy and corn there. And the great thing about ruminants
What's the difference between those two? Arable and pasture?
Yeah, so arable would be flat. And you need access to good water for irrigation, which most of California doesn't even have anyway, even though a lot of it's under, croppable ag. I mean, the whole middle of the country, of the state that you've got with all those almonds.
The San Joaquin Valley, yeah.
Water and Power, the California Heist, is an amazing film about how there's this one company, the wonderful company, that basically owns the rights to the aquifers underneath there. And there's whole towns of people that don't have access to drinking water, but yet they're flood irrigating the almonds for export. Wow. So we're like exporting our water. And these people they have to get bottled water. It's insane.
Wow.
Anyway. So cows don't have to compete with humans for food. They don't need to be eating grains. They can take care and actually restore some very brittle land just with their impact. So their grazing actually stimulates root growth. Their manure inoculates the soil with healthy microbes and other food for the soil. And then the key in regenerative ag and well-managed cattle is to then let the land rest afterwards. Right. And so to keep them moving, just like in, the African savannas, those herds of animals are constantly on the move because they're sort of being chased by, whatever predator. That actually, having the wolves and other predators, cats or whatever, actually makes the land healthier because it prevents overgrazing. So those animals can't be kind of overgrazing one area because then they're just sitting ducks, right? For any predator to come get them. We can do the same thing here with electric fencing. And so we can, allow them to intensively graze one area, not give them choice. So grass isn't, pasture isn't just one type of grass, right? And there's certain things that are maybe tastier to a cow or a sheep than other grasses. And so the trick is to get them to eat as much as they can in one area really intensively, and then to move them and let that land rest. And as that land is resting, that's when the carbon can get sequestered while the grass is regenerating. And so that's what makes a healthy pasture. And that's why there's a big difference between just grass-fed meat and well-managed grass-fed meat, regenerative farming.
Isn't this kind of the way farming always was? Like, was it ever?
I mean, there were shepherds and
Right. I mean, like back in after shepherds, but like the beginnings of this country. I mean, we had to operate this way. There was no choice. Yeah, I mean, otherwise crops wouldn't grow, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some overgrazing happening, like Ireland, and New Zealand. I've seen some pretty heavy impact from sheep grazing. So when you just kind of like have a gigantic area that they can just graze endlessly and without being intensively moved around a lot.
Then they go where they want, and those areas become...
They go where they want. If
right.
they have any parasites, they're pooping them out, and then the next sheep comes and gets inoculated with the parasites too.
Yep.
And so it's not as healthy for the land or for the animals in that kind of a system. So really, if we just step back a few more centuries and look at like wild herds. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like, the difference between maybe Weston A. Price and Paleo, right? Like we can look back to great grandmothers or grandmothers, but then we can look way, way back. And that's when the magic happens, is if we look way back to like actually what happens in nature. Right. And so even like the Audubon Society now is getting behind regenerative grazing for bird health, for attracting more birds. Because if you just have, in the town I live in, we have so much conservation land that's just not being used, and it's open meadow, and there's no animals grazing it really, except for like the deer. We've got a deer population problem, but people like these vistas of just empty space, and it's probably just because there's too many of us and it's just too crowded, right? But really the healthiest land is when it's actually being used properly and grazed in there's many different ways. Joel Salton calls it mob grazing. Alan Savory calls it holistic plan management, and it encompasses a few other things than just grazing. But that's the ticket. So it's not just, was that animal grass fed? Was it managed well?
How does a consumer supposed to know? I mean, and I'm speaking actually for myself too. Like I'm not really in this world. I mean, I am kind of by touching it with people like you and Bobby and Rob and whatnot, but I don't really know. I mean, I order grass-fed meat usually from U.S. Wellness Meats, and I don't know I have no idea how they operate their farm. How does one know? And yeah.
Well, it's tricky because certainly the best way would be to go visit the farm and know that they're doing it that way. Right. And so, farms like the one that we manage, we don't have any labels at all. We're certified organic for the vegetables, but we don't have any like certified regenerative or grass-fed like labeling for our meat program. Just because we sell it so fast. Like people can come, they can see the animals, and then they just want to buy it. Yep. So Savory Institute is coming out with some different programs to sort of verify how the animals were managed. And I think there's other... I think Dr. Bronner's is working with Rodale Institute to come out with like certified regenerative. Like a stamp of approval, like an ISO 9000 certification that a manufacturing company would have. Yeah, so it's sort of beyond just, was this organic? Because that doesn't really mean anything anymore. Right. And, there's some pros and cons to those labels. But I think certainly most people... they're buying food in a grocery store, and, I would say first thing, if you're interested, definitely 100% grass-fed or grass-fed, grass-finished is what you want to look for with your red meat. Right. And then pasture-raised for chickens. And actually near you, Primal Pastures is not that far, and they're amazing. And I think they're going to... I think he said he was going to get at least some cows this year. So that might be a good option for you. I don't know if you know them.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Oh, he might be a fun person for you to talk to.
Primal Pastures?
Primal Pastures. Yeah. Primal Pastures.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll get his.
And I think they're somewhere in the LA-ish area.
Okay.
That's somewhere near you, right?
That's definitely somewhere near me.
Yeah.
Within an hour. I mean, LA County's pretty big, but the LA area is humongous. So,
yeah. So, and it's definitely, I mean, I have a chest, or actually I have an upright freezer where I keep all my meat, and then I have 2 refrigerators actually. So I have like one refrigerator for leftovers and like thawing meat. Like, so the thawing meat's at the bottom of the fridge, the leftovers are at the top of the fridge, and then I have my regular refrigerator with like the everyday stuff in there, and then I have a freezer with tons of frozen meat too. So
that's what we do. We have a freezer chest in our garage, and we'll batch order stuff and keep it in the garage. And if I don't do that, I'm just never ready. I'm never prepared, and that just doesn't work either, because then I go make bad choices. So
exactly. That's what it's all about.
So we were talking before about this divide between plant-based and not meat-based, but like omnivore, more omnivore. And I don't really think we finished that. I wanted to hear more about kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of protesters I was just engaging with this weekend. It was amazing. I was at a conference and they were outside, and it is. I feel really sad for them, actually, and I think, you know, if my only nutrition education and environment, you know, my only nutrition on food systems was Cowspiracy and What the Health, I'd probably be vegan too. Right. Like they're very emotionally compelling films.
Yeah, they're very convincing. Absolutely.
And so I actually went out there and there was a young woman who was from our conference who recently went vegan because she saw What the Health, but her family runs an animal operation, and so she's always grown up on a farm. And she was always overweight and didn't really know what to do with it about it. And so she eliminated meat, but then of course in closer digging, she eliminated all, you know, processed foods and all that kind of stuff. Right. Lost 20 pounds. She's very sold on being vegan at the moment. And she's out there talking to the vegans saying, you know, I'm with you. I'm vegan. I'm not eating animal products, but my family runs a slaughterhouse and raises cattle and pigs and chickens, and I'm trying to make life better for those animals. And at one point, one of the guys was like, oh, and she said, I'm trying my hardest. I don't think you understand, because this conference was sponsored by, or is put on by, a group that's making a small-scale humane slaughterhouse. And so they're out there protesting that there is no such thing as humane slaughter, and, you know, better meat is not a solution. It's all meat is bad. And, you know, there is no, you have to be vegan or nothing. Right. And so I think her being 16 and kind of on their side halfway as being vegan really helped them a little bit to see some nuance. And so she said, you know, I'm just trying. I mean, this farm is here anyway, and I'm just trying to make life better. So why is what I'm doing so bad? And the guy said, no, hon, what you're doing is okay. You just keep doing what you're doing. What you're doing is good. You want to make life better for these animals. This is a really good, noble thing that you're doing. And then I had my phone, you know, video on, and I'm like, but you just said there is no such thing at all as better meat. And that's what the slaughterhouse is trying to do too. Like, these animals are going to be raised for meat anyway. So why not, you know, give them a less stressful experience at the end? And he's like, oh, you're right. And like, all nuance left him and the fanaticism came back, and, you know, he groupthink set back in again, and he immediately shut down.
Man.
So, yeah. And I got it all on video.
Yeah, wow.
But I don't have releases for them, so I can't use it in the film. But that's just so typical, right?
Yeah.
That there's just, it's only good or bad. And the problem is, what they're not realizing is that all life requires death, right? And even if they're going to eat tofu and corn, death happened for that food to get on their plate. And so, you know, what is least harm? And if the life of a mouse is equal to the life of a cow, right? If all mammals' lives are equal, then we should be trying to do least harm to all animals. And so chemical ag should be absolutely off the plate and unacceptable to them. Right. And it's interesting because I had a vegan animal rights / animal welfare person on my podcast just earlier this week. And she was saying, isn't it so great that, you know, farm animals were granted, you know, the status of, I don't forget, like sentience or something. Like it was legally decided in England that farm animals are sentient beings.
Wow.
And I said,
how is
but
that
only
really?
Farm. Yeah, this was a little while ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, does that imply consciousness? A sentient being, or does it just mean they're holy, or what is exactly?
I don't know exactly. But,
to me, sentient means consciousness, and I don't.
Yeah, consciousness, exactly. Right. But the interesting thing, I said, well, what about like crickets and birds and mice? No. You know, that only farm animals. And I think if if they really do care about all animals, then monocropping isn't a solution. Yeah. Industrial ag is no longer a solution. Lab meat, the way it's being made right now, can't be a solution because it's being made with, they're like, oh, they're just 3D printing meat and they're just making, all they need is a substrate. I'm like, well, what's the substrate? What are they making it out of? Oh, GMO soy, right? And so I think that people that are just not, we have nature deficit disorder happening, right? Nobody understands how nature works. No one understands how food is made. People are very detached from, the reason why chicken and fish are cleaner meats than red meat is because they're white. They don't come on a bone as often. They don't look bloody. They don't remind us of actually coming from an animal. When there's actually no humane slaughter regulations at all around chicken or fish, when there is for cattle and other larger four-legged animals.
Yeah, I never thought about that before. The color, there's no color distinction on a chicken between the fat and the meat. So
it just looks like tofu.
Right. It all looks the same. So beef, you're constantly reminded of it's very real. It's like a human. It's very much, I can see that. I had never really thought about that before.
Yeah. So I think that, people are just, unfortunately, they're not, we've got some policies that are making it very, pro-plant friendly. And let's have lots of canola oil and whole grains, and it must be meat that's the villain. When they're not acknowledging the fact that it's not the burger, it's the bun, it's the large fry, it's the 72-ounce Coke.
Well, and it might be the burger in the way that burger was the way that burger was processed and raised. It could be part of it.
It could be. I've looked at the data and I haven't found convincing significant nutrition data showing a major difference to human health between grass-fed and conventional
like corn-fed or.
So the omega-3s are like triple.
Yep.
According to the USDA.
The sixes.
The omega-3 in a grass-fed beef.
Yes.
It's 3 times higher, right? But it's still just pennies compared to like what you would get. Like still the fatty acid profile is so the omega-3s are so insignificant to begin with in
the volume,
grass-fed.
The volume.
Yeah, it's
right,
like literally 1% of the fatty acids are omega-3 and grain-fed, and 3% in of overall fat. So if you compare that to a salmon, that's like you need to eat 8 pounds of grass-fed beef to get like the same omega-3s you would get in a piece of salmon.
Right.
So there are more CLAs, but I just haven't. I actually have a call tomorrow with somebody who might have some better data. But from the data that I've seen, at least the larger studies, there's not. I've seen individual farmers send me their data, right? And some of them are showing significantly better, mineral and fatty acid status in their grass-fed beef. But that could be the breed, that could be the location, like the soil health, what were they feeding it? Like, is it Wagyu beef? Okay, well then the fats are totally different in that compared to Angus anyway. Yep. Right? So there's just a lot of variables when you're looking at individual farms.
Right.
So I just say, even typical beef is so much healthier than typical chicken or typical pork, just because of the iron and B12 there. So
there's such a fear in the world of that clogging arteries, and it's just such a hard, I have a couple people that I work with that have had heart issues. They've had stents put in, and their doctors have just got them. And it's not just their doctors. It's just the belief that has been ingrained for 40 or 50 years. They're not touching red meat. There's nothing I can do. I'm not going to stop working with them because we're working on stuff other than just nutrition. But I just realize where my limit is. I can send them stuff to read. And I send them stuff to watch, and but they ultimately have to make those decisions themselves.
Oh yeah. I mean,
tough.
my dad, my sister's an acupuncturist, and me with my nutrition, he didn't go gluten-free until he went to, 20 years later to some naturopath that suggested he go gluten-free, and boom, he, feels so much better and lost all his weight and everything. So it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know. It's funny. I was engaged in a little conversation on Facebook the other day because I spoke at a keto convention, keto conference, and I had said that in my family, my wife isn't as zealoty as I am. And zealoty is not really the right word. She's not as willing to experiment with things that she considers, kind of edgy. And so she's not as, she likes to go to the donut shop on Saturday morning and get donuts for her. I don't eat donuts, but her and my son. And I have to balance the happiness of my family and the happiness of my wife with what I know is actually healthy, and which makes for a better sense of well-being, the happiness of my household, or the fact that, that sugar is having an impact, God knows how much or how little, once in a while, I just, it's not, these things are not cut and dry. And, it's hard.
And that's a problem in the keto crowd, I found too. I've had a really hard time getting in with them because I think keto is an incredibly useful tool. I'm kind of keto, and I do pretty good, but I don't think it's a solution for everybody. Right. I don't think all carbs are bad for everybody. I mean, there's just no evidence of that,
right.
And so that's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a keto conference that I was not invited to, because whatever. So even though in the film we will be highlighting a doctor that's utilizing keto, she will readily admit that it is, not everybody has to be keto. And, when we look back, we see populations that have had very, very high roots and tuber intake, like the Catawbans, and pretty good health. And it's really the processed foods that start breaking it down. And then maybe you have to look at a lower carb diet to sort of recover from that. But there are people that can do okay on carbs. So,
Diana, I want to change gears just a little bit. I always like to ask people about their habits, about the things in their life that have helped contribute to where they are in their life, have gotten them to the place they are, the success they've seen, daily habits. They could be organizational, they could be business, they could be how you get things done. And I just want to ask, I want to spend the next couple minutes talking about some of the things that you see in your life that have really helped help you, that are you're unwavering from, that have just made a really big difference in your life.
That's a good thing. Well, actually, you're asking me this at a funny time because I'm someone who likes to have a completely cleaned out inbox every day. And just lately, with all this film stuff happening, it's been a little hard for me because I can't check off everything on my list every day. And it's stressing me out.
Is that just in your email list, or do you have like a to-do list also that has to be emptied?
No, I have this big to-do list next to me, and I watch my husband who can have like 3,000 messages in his inbox, and it totally gives me a panic attack to see that notification number, and I try to take care of everything. I'm just one of those people that I'm kind of ADHD, and so that's just one of the ways that I organize myself is to just know that I took care of everything I, needed to do, and that everything I said I was going to do, I did. Right?
How do you organize that? Do you use a manual, a handwritten thing? Do you have a digital solution for your keeping track of everything?
Oh, I've got my little lists right here that I have broken out into, what I need to do for my nutrition practice, what I need to do for the kids.
So we're looking at a spiral notebook checklist.
I like these. I don't know if they're like these 2-column like reporter, like old fashioned 1940s lists.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm digital, like my calendar's digital and all that kind of stuff. It definitely does help me to try to compartmentalize like what days I'm at my office and what days I'm just completely not available to think about anything other than my patients. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to have certain days that I only am a practitioner. And then the other days I'm doing more media and, writing and recording my own podcast and that kind of thing. So, yeah. And then also, trying to say no to maybe events and other things that, normally I would have said yes to, but then someone told me this trick too. Like, would you say yes if it was happening in 2 weeks? Like, you know what I mean? It's really easy to say yes to something that's going to happen next December, right?
Right.
Like,
right. Oh, you mean if it's happening right away versus in 8 months?
Right. Well, you're if you had to actually deal with whatever that event was next week, would you still want to do it?
Right.
Because I get asked for a lot of things, and so instead of saying yes to all of them, I actually try to envision, like, if this was happening next week, would I be dreading it or would I be psyched for it?
Huh.
So
that's cool. It sounds a little bit like, and I learned this I listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast. Probably, mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't listen to all of them because it's kind of overwhelming. But he interviewed a guy named Derek Sivers who talks about the hell yes. For him, if something's not a hell yes, it's a no. And so that's what this is then, because I'm really good friends with Michelle Tam, and that's exactly the terminology that she. Now that I'm remembering, gotcha.
That's the terminology she used. And I'm sure she listens to Tim Ferriss' podcast, so I'm positive that that's where she got that from.
Cool. He's the source of everything, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's so prolific in his in everything he puts out. But
yeah. So anyway, so it's hard for me to be in a place. One of the first times in my life where I as efficient as I try to be, I'm actually trying to reconcile with the fact that my list probably won't get checked off.
Right.
And just trying to organize myself around that, because I don't love looming deadlines. College was really stressful for me because just knowing that the test was coming up, or knowing that I had all this future work, it was very hard for me to find time to rest. Mm-hmm. And so that's been just trying to work in rest when you have so much on your plate and you are working for yourself.
Right.
That's the hard part.
Do you find time to exercise or to meditate, or do you have any other practices like that, or do yoga that help you kind of bring it all together?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I work out every day. And whether that, it depends on how I'm feeling that day and how my adrenals are doing. So sometimes it's just a long walk, and other days it might be just a little bit of lifting or whatever. So I really just adjust it depending on how my body feels that day.
Do you do it at home, or do you go to a gym?
I go to a gym in the wintertime, and then in the summertime I don't go to a gym, and I'll just be outside. And then I have in my office actually a ton of like weights and kettlebells and stuff like that.
Cool.
So and then I do tons of yoga.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact tonight I'm just finishing up a 30-day nutrition challenge at my yoga studio. So I'm yeah, so I have a great relationship with the local yoga studio, and I just absolutely love yoga.
Is this a nutrition challenge that you created for them, or did they do and you're just participating? Or
they were doing, actually, was a meditation / yoga / nutrition challenge, and so we had someone facilitating daily meditations every day, and I'm not as good at that as I'd like to be. So that's something I aspire to one day. I'm not fantastic at not being type A.
Right.
So one day, but when I go to a yoga class, but the thing is too, even when I'm doing yoga, I have to be the most bendy and have to be
right. Right. It's a little you got a little competitive in there.
Sometimes.
Competitive yoga.
But
who's the big winner?
It's been great because a lot of people at this yoga studio are pretty afraid of meat, and so that's been
interesting.
An interesting thing for me to balance.
Totally right. Are you a person that does better when you have a class to go to or a place to meet people to get yourself to do it, or do you do it no matter what, wherever you are? Like,
kind of both. One thing that's been awesome that I was doing for a long time before I started lifting again. For a while, I was doing Dan Pardee. Do you know Dan Pardee?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, he's awesome. He's in the Bay Area, and he had a site called Dance Plan for a while, and now it's humanos.me is the name of it.
Okay.
And so he has these little workouts, these daily workouts that are just body weight workouts, and they're meant to be sort of incorporated into your day. And there's a lot of other like modules you can buy, and you can link it up with the Fitbit or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so those are really great. So I will move every day. Right. It's just a matter. And sometimes it's literally just me going out and weeding with the crew. Like if it's a beautiful sunny day and I just feel like I've been sitting too long, then I'll just go hang out with the farmers.
Cool.
So, yeah. So I guess, the big thing next for us is just moving forward with our stories with the film.
Yeah, right. You mentioned something before we started recording, kind of a big thing that you are about to announce, but since the podcast won't come out for 3 or 4 weeks, I can
announce it here.
Yes.
Kind of before I announce it publicly, but Applegate is sponsoring us to come out to Expo West, and we will be there with a sizzle of the film. So sort of a demo, really, of how we intend to tell the story and how we intend to sort of address things in the story. So I will be on a Better Meat panel at Expo West, and that'll be interesting. And then I'm going to be meeting with a bunch of other people while I'm out in that area too, just in the film world, which is, different for me, coming from the farm and nutrition East Coast.
Yep.
But I'm looking forward to it. And
when do you hope to have the film out, or do you have any kind of schedule developed?
So if we get all the funding we need, then it will be 2019. Okay. So our plan is to shoot all through the summer and then post-production in the fall. But films are expensive. And
they are.
And we're doing awesome with our crowdfunder, like better than I thought we would do. But there's still a lot of private funds we need to raise as well. So I can't expect, everyone in the paleo community to help this out. And I really feel like, if they're the only people I'm reaching with this, then I've failed. Like I'm really trying to get out to all those people that are just kind of uncomfortable with meat, whether the nutrition or maybe the ethics of it, or they've heard that it's bad for the environment. I want to get those folks. Right.
Well, that's where it's really a broad net. Yeah, that's really where it's going to make a big difference. The paleo world is already listening and already on board. Like I'm on board. I want to see the film and I want to hear what you have to say, but it's not going to change my mind. My mind is already, I'm with you, So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
How can people jump on board? How can they find out more about what you're up to and what the film is going to be? Where do they find you? Where do they interact? Do they have questions with you? All that stuff.
Yeah. The film site is sustainabledish.com/film, and they can see a little clip of me. I'm actually not going to be in the film. It's just a pitch video. So I'm not at all. My goal is to promote.
Are you directing? Are you directing or producing?
I'm the producer. So I've hired a director, and actually her family started Maple Hill Creamery. And so she's really educated in, full fat nutrition and regenerative, farming, why 100% grass fed is important and all that kind of stuff. But she's also a documentary filmmaker, which is really great.
Very cool.
And then I have a newsletter and blog at sustainabledish.com and some books that I've written there. And then on Instagram is my favorite social media platform.
Me too.
And I'm at Sustainable Dish.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and you've been more than generous. And I know how much of a, I know now that you use the hell yes thing. So maybe, so I guess this was a hell yes for you.
This was a hell yes.
I'm glad. I'm so glad. I'm honored. And who knows, maybe when you're out here next, you're going to be out here in a few weeks. Maybe I don't know if I'm going to that expo or not. I've never been. So who knows? Maybe we'll get a chance to meet in person.
It's big and overwhelming.
Big. Yeah.
But it's kind of cool.
Yeah. So in any case, I wish you luck, and I hope that we will stay in touch, and maybe we'll have you back when the movie gets closer to coming out, and we can talk more about your journey.
Sounds great. I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Cool. Hey, it's Andy, and thanks so much for listening. I ask you a favor. If you were touched, moved, or inspired by anything you heard today, chances are someone you know would be too. Please take a moment to think about who and send them a link to the episode. If you're super stoked, head to iTunes and write a review. The best way to keep current on all of our guests and conversations is to subscribe so that the latest episode will automatically be delivered straight to your phone. The apps I use for that: Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or Pocket Casts. The Andy Petronic podcast is produced by our team: Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. Big thanks to Nikki Grudadaria for all the artwork. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. I'm Andy Petronic. Thanks for listening.